Map of somebody who has reached that destination. So you will follow a map of somebody who has reached that destination. So somebody, for example, who's got to, I don't know, wherever you want to go. If someone wants to leave from London to go to Medina, he would do well to follow the map of somebody who's actually reached Medina, because that map is more likely to get you to the right place. But if you follow the map or the steps of somebody who's still on that journey, you may end up in the wrong place because that person hasn't yet reached. So it's important then that we want to learn that we read books on how to learn. And once you read books on how to learn, that will help you, inshallah ta'ala, to cut or to miss many of the steps or the pitfalls that people fall into. So this tool can be summarized into 2 points. Number one, the importance of having this methodology or this roadmap And number two, that this path, this road to knowledge is based upon two things. And those two things are what you study and how you study it. And the second one, who you study with. The first one is what you study and how you study it. And the second one is who you study with. So the first part, under the importance, the author says, for every goal, for everything that is sought, there is a route connecting to it. So the one who follows that route to the goal will achieve it. And the one who turns away from this route will not attain the goal. And indeed, knowledge has a route. Whoever errs in following that route will be deviated from it and will not achieve the aim. And maybe one would get little, will achieve a little bit of knowledge with much exertion. So what the author is saying here, may Allah give him tawfiq, is that a person who does not study in the right, does not transverse the right path to study, will either not achieve any knowledge, or he or she will achieve a little bit of knowledge with a lot of effort. They'll have wasted a lot of effort or put a lot of effort in and only achieved a minimal amount of knowledge in comparison to that effort. So this is why it's important that a person has this an understanding of what is the way to study. Okay, now the Sheikh goes into okay, how do you study? And this route was mentioned closely by Muhammad Murtada ibn Muhammad الزبيدي صاحب تاج العروض صاحب تاج العروس. The author Muhammad Murtada, the author of Taj al-Urus, mentioned that in a poem that he has, Alfiyatu Sanad, wherein he says, and these are the two lines of poetry that you can see here, wherein he says, no person will be able to achieve the goal of knowledge, to comprehensively attain all of knowledge, even if he had 1,000 years. So take from every science the best of it. Even if you had 1,000 years, you'll never be able to achieve all of knowledge. So what do you do? He says, فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ أَحْسَنًا. So take from every knowledge its best. Okay, how do you take from every knowledge? Every science. فَنٍ here means science. How do you take from it the best? He says, بِحِفْظِ مَتْنٍ جَامِعٍ لِلرَّاجِحِ. By number one, memorizing a manual, a concise book, which comprises of the right views. We will discuss this further. And the second part, تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. You take it at the hands of or upon a beneficial, sincere person. You take it with a teacher who is going to be beneficial to you, i.e., they are proficient in what they are teaching, and they are nasih, they are trustworthy, i.e., they're going to give you what you need. So the author goes on to explain this. So the root of knowledge and its methodology is based upon two matters. The one who implements these two matters, whoever takes hold of these two matters, then he has glorified knowledge. And he seeks it through a way which is possible for him to reach or for her to reach that knowledge. As for the first matter, it is memorizing a small, concise, approved book. فحفظ متن جامع للراجح. And it says it is a must to memorize. فلا بد من حفظ. And whoever thinks that he can memorize knowledge, whoever thinks that he can attain knowledge, he will gain knowledge without memorizing, then he is seeking the impossible. And the small book to be memorized is the concise and approved book, i.e., the one relied upon by the experts in that science. والمحفوظ المعول عليه هو المتن الجامع للراجح أي المعتمد عند أهل الفن. i.e., the one that is relied upon by the scholars of that specific science. So if you study a certain science, then the book that you will study is the one that the scholars of that science have approved of. And there's various reasons. There are various reasons why they may approve of a certain book. But the point is, you will study the known, well-known, approved book. And there are many benefits that we've mentioned in Halyatu Talib al-Ilm in why you would study a specific book, and not just whatever your teacher teaches you from the pamphlets and small books or big books that they may teach you. Then you may go to another part of the world and nobody knows the book that you studied. And that will be something that will be an obstacle for you. So there are many benefits for why a person would study a well-known, relied upon book by the people of that science. So that's the first one, the first point, that you memorize for each science, you memorize a small, concise book that is relied upon, that is primarily, or most of it is, on the correct view. And the second matter is that you take it from a proficient teacher. So you will run to a sheikh and rely upon a sheikh such that he will explain to you the meanings from that book. And this teacher has to have, or should have, two qualities. The teacher should have two qualities. He says, يتصف بهذين الوصفين. He is described with these two descriptions. Number one, وأولهما الإفادة. Number one, the teacher has to be able to benefit. He has ifada. He gives you a benefit. And that entails that he or she is an expert in the knowledge. So he must be known to be from the people that seek knowledge and take it until his status has become known. And the foundation, the Shaykh says, well, aslu fi hada, and the foundation in this, what you can rely upon, the evidence and the basis of this, is what is relied from Ibn Abbas, related from Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, you will hear from me. تسمعون ويسمع منكم ويسمع ممن يسمع منكم. You will hear from me, and it will be heard from you, and it will be heard from those that heard from you, i.e., there will be a continuous people. You don't take knowledge from the books themselves, you will take knowledge from the mouths of men. And this is the meaning that is found in many of the scholars' books, where they say they say what the meaning of which is, knowledge is taken from the mouths of men, not from the depths of book. And they also mentioned statements like, whoever takes knowledge from the books, then his mistakes will be more than his accuracies. So there must be a teacher for you, for us. And the teacher, first quality is that they know, they have knowledge, they can benefit. They have to be proficient in that science. And the second point, that the second quality of a teacher is that he or she is nasih, or has النصيحة. أما الوصف الثاني فهو النصيحة. As for the second description of the teacher, then it is النصيحة وتجمع معنيين اثنين, which comprises, nasiha itself comprises, in this aspect, comprises of 2 points. The first point is that the teacher, the sheikh that you're going to study with, should be an example to be followed. صلاحية الشيخ للاقتداء به والاهتداء بهديه وذله وسمته. And the first of what it means to be nasih is that the teacher can be an example to be followed. And number 2, والآخر معرفته بطرائق التعليم, is that the teacher is sincere in the sense that he knows or she knows how to teach you. Is that he or she knows how to teach. بحيث يحسن تعليم المتعلم ويعرف ما يصلح له وما يضره. What does that mean? When he say that he knows how to teach you, is that he knows the manners of teaching, the way to teach, how to get the knowledge into the understanding of the student, and he also knows what benefits the student at what time. Such that the teacher has to have the ability to discern what benefits the students and at what time. There are different approaches, different needs of students, so the teacher should be cognizant of that and have an insight. And the opposite of that is what we see from some who teach the student in a way that does not benefit the students but may benefit the teacher. So now a person may not have a sheikh that he can go to. When we say sheikh, we're talking about scholars. You may not have a scholar. When I say sheikh right now, when I said it right now, what I meant is a scholar. You may not have a scholar to go back to. So then what you do in that time, you try your best to go to somebody that benefits you. And although they may not be scholars, you make use of your time, you benefit, and you take what you can from the person that can benefit you, as long as they are obviously teaching the right thing, although they may not themselves be scholars. As for brothers or sisters who may be teaching when they are not scholars because of a need, like there not being enough teachers or scholars in a certain land, and so students come back and teach, then they themselves, the student themselves, have to learn how to teach. So it is not appropriate for you as a student to set up a class for the general people. If you're entrusted with setting up a class for the general people, that you teach the general people what you want to revise. So some students, perhaps they come back and they teach the general people as if the general people themselves are students of knowledge who he wants to push them into a certain subject because that's the subject that he himself wants to revise for his own benefit. Whereas the students, may not need that subject at that particular time. That is not being sincere in your teaching. Or this teacher, the young student, or the student who is a teacher at the same time, due to a necessity in the situation, in the environment that he or she is in, has to discern, has to look. Also, as a parent, you should look towards your children. It does not make sense, and it is not from sincerity towards the student, from nasiha towards the student, that you teach the student something which is fard kifaya, generally speaking, whilst the student himself or herself needs something which is fardu ayn. If you cannot teach the student that fardu ayn, then you should recommend him or her, that student, to go to somebody who can teach them and fulfill that without feeling any jealousy in your heart. So this is a big responsibility upon the students who are also teaching, that if they know of somebody that will better benefit the student, they should send their student to that person, even if it means that they may not have that student anymore. Because the first aim in teaching is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by being sincere to the students, by showing the students what will benefit them, not by you trying to benefit at the detriment of your student. Akhi, so what if it is your family? I don't understand that question. If you teach your family, you teach them what will benefit them bit by bit. So then, in summary, then the Shaykh rahimahullah in the fifth tool mentioned the importance of following the right path in seeking knowledge, and then told us, okay, that right path is found in two major steps or two main steps. Number one, memorizing a concise book in every science, and number two, understanding that and learning that at the hands of a proficient and trustworthy or sincere teacher. Which is the same thing that Sheikh Uthaymeen mentioned when explaining Hilya Talib al-Ilm. If you remember that, Sheikh Rahimahullah mentioned that you have to have hifd, you have to memorize. He says what it means that we read a lot and we memorize less than that. And what has remained with us is what we memorized. So he says, be careful, be careful, be careful. Be careful from the people that just say to you, understanding, understanding, understanding. When we hear some of the people today say, understanding, doesn't matter if you memorize, just understand it. Allahu musta'an. Understanding and memorizing have to go hand in hand together. There has to be something that you've memorized in the Islamic sciences, in each Islamic science, as a student of knowledge. The sixth tool, the author rahimahullah ta'ala, وفقه الله تعالى says, رعاية فنونه في الأخذ وتقديم الأهم فالمهم. Paying attention to the sciences to be taken. The sixth tool in understanding knowledge is paying attention to the sciences which you want to take, which you want to study, and prioritizing the more important ones over the next. In the previous chapter, on the previous point, the author rahimahullah told us that you have to take from every science. Okay, so now the question is, okay, which science do I take? Do I take them at the same time? What do I do? So in this point, in this tool, what the author says can be summarized in 4 points. Number one, take all sciences. The student has to learn from all sciences. When I say has to, I mean it is recommended for him. Number two, don't belittle a science due to ignorance. Don't belittle a science due to your own ignorance. Number three, how to prioritize. The author rahimahullah will tell us how to prioritize. And number four, the author rahimahullah ta'ala will discuss combining sciences at the same time. Can you study more than one science at the same time? So the first one, the student has to learn all sciences. The second one, don't belittle the science due to your ignorance. And the third one, how to prioritize in what to learn. And the fourth one, the last one, is combining between sciences at the same time. So the author, rahimahullah, hafidhullah, says, Ibn al-Jawzi said, Jam'ul ulumi mamduh. Combining the sciences is recommended. من كل فن خذ ولا تجهل به فالحر مطلع على الأسرار. Take from every science and do not be ignorant of it. For verily the free person recognizes the secrets. And this is the point that Sheikh Muhammad Adam al-Ethiopi Hafidhullah mentions in his book, that the teacher should have the quality of knowing each science or the different sciences. He may not know all of them to the same level, but he will know the sciences. Why? Because the sciences are intertwined. And you'll have a greater understanding of a certain topic if you can view it from different angles. And then the Sheikh, Hafidhahullah, the author, goes on to say that the teacher of our teachers, Muhammad ibn Mani', may Allah have mercy upon him, said, "It is not befitting for the virtuous one to abandon a science from the sciences, which assist in understanding the book and the sunnah, if he knows within himself to have the strength to learn it." So that's a condition. And it is not justifiable for him to point at the knowledge that he is ignorant of and turn back from its scholars, because indeed this is a deficiency and vice. So the intelligent must speak with knowledge or remain quiet with tolerance, or else he will be included in the statement, "It came to me that Sahel defamed ignorantly sciences which Sahel does not know, sciences that had he read he would not detest, but being pleased with ignorance is simple, is Sahel." The author here is making the point that you should not leave any science off. So فالحر مطلع على الأسرار, that the person who is free can see, has an insight into the secrets, into the intricate matters. So the person who is free, i.e., the person is not restricted to one or two sciences, is able to be more proficient, understand the details and the intricacies better than a person who's only studied one science or two sciences. So you see that the person who has studied, for example, tajweed, an Arabic language, and fiqh, and usul al-fiqh, and aqidah, and tawheed, and hadith, dirayatan wa riwayatan, that person is more complete and will be able to dissect books of knowledge and statements of the scholars in those different fields better than the person who's just studied one or two sciences. The person who studied one or two sciences may not know certain intricacies of other sciences. Whereas the person who is able to combine all that knowledge, then he is free. He's able to look at the details in each, in the topics that are there. Allah knows best, but that's what I've understood from the Shaykh, Hafidhullah. So, in the sixth tool, point number 2, don't belittle the science due to ignorance of it. He says, "It has come to me that Sahel." Some people, when they can't study something or they don't understand something, they say, "Oh, well, that's not important." Because why do they say that's not important? Just because they didn't understand it. That is a deficiency in the person. Thirdly, the Shaykh Hafidahullah says, okay, how do you prioritize? Now we understand what we have to learn, or we should learn as a student. We should learn from each science, a beginner's book at least. Then how do we prioritize? He goes on to say, and indeed, paying attention to the sciences is beneficial by complying with two fundamentals. How do you prioritize? Two things. Number one, prioritizing the more important over the less from the issues which the learner requires to worship Allah. So the first thing the person focuses on is the first thing that a person focuses on is that which he or she needs for their worship of Allah. What is obligatory upon them, and from the worship of Allah, what is obligatory upon them specifically. So, for example, student of knowledge, it is not nice for him or her to have studied one subject or two subjects at a high level to a high standard, and they are ignorant of other subjects which are obligatory upon them. Repeat that. A student of knowledge, it is not appropriate that he or she studies a certain subject to a high level, to a fard kifaya level, and he or she is totally ignorant or primarily ignorant. When I say totally ignorant, it doesn't mean they haven't got a clue in the world, but it means they haven't studied something in the subject which is obligatory upon them. So, for example, when it comes to fiqh of things which are obligatory upon the person, he or she hadn't studied a book in that, or a topic, a certain lessons in that, but they are studying high level topics in Mustalah al Hadith, or even study Mustalah al Hadith, and they haven't studied the five pillars, or at least Salah, Zakah, Saum, and so forth. So looking after, paying attention to what a person studied comprises of two parts. Number one, prioritizing. How do you prioritize? You prioritize by learning that which is obligatory upon you as a worshipper of Allah, in your worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you prioritize that which you need from when you wake up to when you sleep. And the second step in paying attention to the knowledge that you're learning is that you take from each science a summarized book in every science, in every topic. أن يكون قصده في أول طلبه تحصيل مختصر في كل فن. That his intention at the start of his learning is that he attains a mukhtasar, a concise book in every science, until he completes, until he has done this for the ulum and nafi'ah, for the sciences which are beneficial. Then after that, the student, once he's got this first level of having studied the books which are beneficial in each science, after that, the student looks to himself or herself. And he does this with obviously the teachers, his or her teacher's advice, and sees what he is good at or she is good at, and what he or she is leaning towards. So, for example, there are some people that love to study Quran, the qira'at, how to recite the Quran in different ways that have been reported on the Prophet ﷺ. So after they've studied as a student of knowledge different topics, they will focus on qira'at. Some people, they love fiqh and the usul al-fiqh. They find that their heart is content towards that. It's easier for them. So they will go to that. They can have takhassus or specify in that specific, in that topic. That happens after the first step of having learned a book in the different sciences. And then the last point under this tool: is a person allowed to combine learning between two sciences at the same time? The author, Waffaqahullah, mentions, and from the famous poems of the people of Shanqit is the speech of one of them. And if you want to achieve a science, then perfect it, and stop from going on to another before finishing it. وإن تريد تحصيل فن تممه وعن سواه قبل الانتهاء مه. I.e., you start one book in a science and you complete it. And don't look to other books in different sciences or even in that science before you finish it. And delving into too many sciences is to be restrained. Because if twins were to try to come out together, they both would not come out. وفي ترادف العلوم المنع جاء إن توأمان استبقا لن يخرجا. What that means is that the asl, the foundation for most people, is that they study one science. Once they finish that science, they'll study another. They start one book, finish the book, then go to another book. But then the Sheikh goes on to mention at the bottom exceptions. ومن عرف من نفسه قدرة على الجمع جمع. And whoever knows from himself or herself an ability that they can combine more than one topic at the same time, then he can do so. But he will be the exception to the general rule. But again, this should be with the advice of your teacher. Whoever's teaching you, then this should be advice. Our situation is a bit different because we're studying bits and bobs from here and there. One day you're at one masjid studying something, another day you go to another place, study something else. Then this is from my own notes. What you should do, and Allah knows best, you should have at least one teacher. Out of all those teachers, you should have at least one teacher who you seek advice from. And you say, okay, I'm thinking of going to this class. What do you think? Is it my level? Is it not my level? Okay, I've studied this. Now I want to go into this. What do you think? And you seek advice from somebody who is either a scholar, and if you haven't got scholars who you can seek advice from in that level, at that personal interaction level, then at least from someone who is ahead of you. And what you know from them is that they understand the path of learning. As for you just being a sort of consumer, or as for us being consumers and we just pick from classes what we want, then you will see that we will spend a lot of time. It is good to combine. Okay, when you want to combine between sciences, what it means is that you don't, for example, say you have Aqidah, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and you have Fiqh, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and you have Hadith, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, Tafsir, like that, okay? The Shaykh, what he's talking about here is, should you study level 1 in Aqidah and level 1 in Fiqh and level 1 in Hadith all at the same time? That's what he's saying. He's saying generally no, unless you have the ability. But what we're talking about before is that a person shouldn't study level 1, 2, 3, 4 Aqidah up to level 4 and then he starts level 1 in Fiqh. No, he should study level 1 in Aqidah, then level 1 in Fiqh. And when he finishes that, level 1 in Hadith, level 1 in Usul al-Fiqh, level 1 in Tafsir. So he should go on level 1 across the board of different sciences. So he should combine between the sciences he does level 1, level 1 in Hadith, level 1 in Fiqh, level 1 in Aqidah, level 1 and so forth. Then he goes to level 2 in Aqidah, level 2 in Fiqh, level 2 in Hadith and so forth. Recommended books, inshallah. We see how we do for time. because I wanted to get through some more, inshallah. If the time is still young, if his time is still not long, inshallah, we'll discuss some books. But books mainly depend on your teachers. Books depend on the teacher that you're going to study with, inshallah. But there are some books which are widely accepted. Okay. At the end of this, the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, finishes there by mentioning the last point, which is a person can combine. For example, Monday you study Aqidah level 1, Tuesday you study Fiqh level 1, Friday you study Arabic level 1. A person, should he do that or not? Okay, if he finds or she finds the ability that they can still benefit from everything and learn properly, then they can do that. But generally speaking, speak to your teacher. You should have a teacher who is like a mentor. If not all of them, but at least one or two, or at least one that you can discuss and have. And he or she has an idea of your journey, where you are at your journey, what you've memorized from the Quran, what you memorized from the Adhkar, and they can tell you, okay, what you need to memorize next. Okay, the seventh tool. The seventh tool, the author rahimahullah ta'ala, hafidhahullah ta'ala says, al-mubadaratu ila tahsili, rushing to taking knowledge, to attaining knowledge. وَاغْتِنَامُ سِنِّ الصَّبَاءِ وَالشَّبَابِ, and taking advantage of the ages, of the years of childhood and young age. I learning whilst you're young, and take advantage of your youth. And this seventh tool can be summarized into 3 parts. Number 1, the benefit of learning when young. The author mentions the benefit of learning when young. Number 2, don't think that you can't learn when you're older. Don't think that you can't learn when you're older. And number 3, what is the reason between this? What is the reason behind this? Sorry. So number 1, under the first part of this seventh tool, the author mentions a statement from Imam Ahmed, and he says, "I do not compare to the youth in anything except when something was in my sleeve and fell down. And knowledge acquired in," and he goes on to say, that's the end of Imam Ahmed's quote, "and knowledge acquired in young age is easier on the soul and has stronger attachment and union." Al-Hasan al-Basri, may Allah have mercy upon him, said, "Knowledge in childhood is like inscription or engraving onto a stone." So the strength of knowledge in childhood will remain. Like the strength of the inscription in the stone will remain. So the one who utilized his young age has acquired what he requires and will be praised in his old age. And then he mentions lines of poetry, which is mentioned: "Utilize young age, O young one. In the old age, people of high ranks will praise you." So this is in the importance. The author is giving the importance of the fact that learning when you're young has a great benefit. A student will find great benefit in learning when they're young. And for those of us who are not perhaps young anymore and have our own children, then giving the children an environment where they can learn is very important. And I've mentioned on more than one occasion that I've seen students, young students, who, if they were in the right environment, will have been great scholars. And Allah knows best. Allah knows best the future. But from what you see of them, had they been in the right environment, they would have been great students of knowledge in their teens. In their teens. But because the environment was not suitable, then that ability was not cultivated. But Alhamdulillah, because it's a qadr of Allah, Allah chose that. So Alhamdulillah. But it's important that we give our children, especially, the right environment to learn so that they can, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, flourish into scholars who will benefit themselves and the community that they're in. The second thing now, the Sheikh writes for us older people, so that we don't give up hope. He says, and no one should conceive that the elder will not be able to learn. Rather, it was the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam who learned whilst they were old or whilst they were of age. And this was mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, may Allah have mercy upon him, in his book of knowledge in Sahih. So it's not a definite decree that a person who is old cannot learn, or older, not a child or not a teenager anymore, he cannot learn. It's not, that's not decree that khalas he can't learn. He gives us the reason. So what's the reason for this? What it mainly boils down to of factors that we can change. He says, and indeed it becomes difficult to learn in old age, like Al-Mawardi explained in Adab al-Dunya wa Deen, due to a lot of work, the burden of the obstacles that are in the way, an increase in relationships, i.e., you have more ties now. So one capable to avoid it will be able to acquire knowledge. So as a person gets older, it doesn't mean that knowledge becomes impossible for him or her to attain. What it means is that as you grow, you have more things tying you down. You have to work, or you have to look after the children, or you have to look after the household, and all these different things will take away from your time of learning. Whereas a child doesn't have that. He wakes up, he goes to school, comes back, eats, everything is ready for him. So he has a free mind. He's not worrying about bills to pay. So if a student in his older or her older age is able to diminish those obstacles, then he will still benefit from a lot from his time. But he has to, or she has to, sacrifice. So now perhaps the person who is older has only 2 evenings a week where he or she is free. Only 2 evenings. He has to make the decision. Am I going to go to play football and miss the lesson? Am I going to watch something on YouTube and not attend the lesson? I only have 1 week a day, 1 day a week free. I want to relax in that day. Then this is a decision that a student makes. The student who sacrifices his time, even that 1 day a week, you will see that bi'idhnillah he will benefit. But a student who makes excuses, then his excuses are his excuses. So as life goes on, it gets harder, but it's not impossible. As life goes on, it gets harder, but it is not impossible. The eighth tool that the author mentions, لزوم التأني في طلبه وترك العجلة, being moderate in learning and not rushing. We'll explain what rushing means, because in the previous one we said hastening, going towards knowledge. Don't waste time in learning knowledge. Now, what does it mean not to have ajala? Tarkul ajala, leaving rushing, or hasty, being hasty. Inshallah, the difference will become clear. And this eighth tool can be summarized into 3 main points, and Allah knows best. Number 1, knowledge is heavy. Knowledge is a heavy thing. Number 2, being gradual is very important. Number 2, being gradual is very important. And number 3, practical steps on learning gradually. How do you learn gradually? What does it mean to learn gradually and not rushing? So the author starts off by telling us that knowledge is important. Why does he say to us, why does he make this title that if you want to glorify knowledge and attain it and really truly learn Islamic knowledge, why do you have to take your time and not rush? He explains it in the first part of this. إن تحصيل العلم لا يكون جملة واحدة. Verily, attaining knowledge cannot be done in one go. As some of the scholars explain, knowledge is not by stretching your hand and then taking it, like you're taking something from a shelf. And some of them would say, whoever tries to gain knowledge in one go will lose it in one go. And he goes on to say, وَإِنَّ لِلْعِلْمِ فِيهِ ثِقَلًا كَثِقَلِ الْحَجْرِ فِي يَدِ حَامِلِهِ. That knowledge has a weight like the weight of a stone in the hand of one carrying it. The heart is weak. If the heart is weak, it will not be able to handle it. And he says, Allah says, Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila. Verily we will cast upon you, we will send down upon you, O Muhammad, O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a heavy word. And if this, the author says, and if this is the characteristics of the Quran, which has been made easy, as Allah said, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, and we have made the Quran easy for remembrance. So what do you think about sciences and other than this? So the Quran, which Allah said is going to be made easy, Allah also describes it as being a heavy word upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So knowledge has a heaviness to it. Even though the Quran has been made easy. So what about other sciences of Islam, like Arabic language, like usul al-fiqh and so forth? They'll be even more harder because they haven't been made easy to this as the Quran has been made easy. So once we know that knowledge is heavy, then what do? We have to take it gradually. The author goes on to say, and the Quran was revealed following this rule in portions separately, according to the incidents and the current situations. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْلَا نُزِّلَ عَلَيْهِ الْقُرْآنُ جُمْلَةً وَاحِدَةً كَذَلِكَ لِنُثَبِّتَ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ وَرَتَّلْنَاهُ تَرْتِيلًا. Allah says what could translate as, and those who disbelieve say, why was the Quran not revealed to him, i.e. to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all at one go? Because the Quran came down in stages over 23 years. Allah goes on to say what translates as, thus we have sent it as such, so that we may strengthen thereby your heart. I.e., we have sent it bit by bit, so that your heart will take strength. Over time, it will become stronger. The author goes on to say, and this ayah is a proof for being moderate in seeking knowledge and gradual and not hastening, as mentioned by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi and Al-Raghib al-Asfahani. And from the poetry of An-Nahas النحاس الحلبي قوله اليوم شيء وغدا مثله من نخب العلم التي تلتقط يحصل المرء به حكمة وإنما السيل اجتماع النقط. Today something and tomorrow something like it. Bit by bit, day by day, we'll get something, and tomorrow something more. From selected knowledge that you have picked. Bits of knowledge. Today you get 3 fawaid, 3 benefits, tomorrow 5 benefits. You do 1 line of the book, tomorrow you do 5 points in a book. And through that, man shall acquire wisdom through this. And indeed, knowledge is made up of tiny drops. And indeed, knowledge is made up of tiny drops. I.e., the ocean, and indeed the oceans, i.e., the ocean, if you were to take it bit by bit, is just drops of water. But when those drops of water come together, you see that the ocean is wide and vast. Likewise, knowledge. Today is 2 lines or 3 hadith that you study. Tomorrow, another 3 hadith, or another 5 lines of poetry, or another 3 lines from a certain book. And the day after, another 5 lines, another 5 lines. And bit by bit, those will add up, such that after 10 years, you will see that you will have attained a lot. And from there is the famous statement of the person, the scholar, who was struggling with a certain topic, and so he was going to give up, and then he saw a tree, a stone, and there was a drop of water that kept going on the same place in the stone. It could be from a river or from something else. And when he saw that after each drop, although it was trickling, after the period of time, it had left a mark on the stone. And he said to himself something along the lines of that even water, with its delicate, the water being so soft, it's just a droplet of water that keeps dropping on the same place on the rock. It had an effect, or had an impact on the rock. He said, knowledge. He said, my heart, I'm not as hard as rock, and knowledge is not as soft as water. So definitely, if I keep learning, I will get also an effect upon me. The point being now, take your time. Make sure you study, but don't rush. Don't try to take everything in one go. Bit by bit, knowledge will come. There will be some times when you go to your class and you will understand 3% of what the teacher said. Make dua. Ask the teacher for help. If still it's not clear, then make dua, ask Allah. But know that that will not always be the case. Bit by bit, maybe on your way home, it will click what the teacher said. Oh, that's what that meant. And it will click. But don't give up. Don't say, oh, I'm going to give it up. I'm not going to study anymore. Okay, then the author gives us steps now on how to be moderate. What does it mean? What does it practically mean for us to take it step by step? He says, and included in moderation and gradualism is two things. Number one, beginning with small books authored in the fields of knowledge, memorizing and seeking explanations. And it seems like this is a repetitive point that the Sheikh is mentioning, and hopefully it will stick in our minds. Number one, being gradual is you take that beginner's book in a science and you master it. You understand it. You memorize it. You understand it. And you have an explanation that the Shaykh gave to you. And number two, in being gradual, is turning away from the lengthy books, from the big books, not going into the big books, which are above a person's level. So if you're on level 1, don't read a book that is level 5. And this is just for your benefit, for our benefit. It's not a way of suppressing knowledge from you. But what will happen if you try to do that? What will happen is you will never achieve the knowledge of level 1, nor will you achieve the knowledge of level 5. You will just be somebody who is confused. And either you will know that you're confused, or you will not know that you're confused. You will think that you know, but you don't know. And that's even worse. If a person thinks that he knows and he doesn't know. And lastly, the author mentions, and the one who looks into lengthy books is as if committing a crime against his deen, and neglecting moderation in learning may lead to destruction. And from the marvelous quotes is the saying of Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i, one of the scholars of Damascus of the past generation. And this is a beautiful quote. We're going to have it on the summary screen, inshallah ta'ala. طعام الكبار سم الصغار. That means, translator, the food of the elder, the food of the grown up is poison for the baby, or poison for the young one. And this is a principle that we use in all of our life, even in our secular learning. If you're in year 5, going to a year 11 class will only confuse you most of the time. And from there is, anyway, we won't mention the examples. So a person being patient in learning, not hasty, is that he does not try to study two books that are too big for him or her before the time. Because what will happen is it will only confuse the person, even if he or she thinks that he's understanding it. The 9th tool, which will be our last tool for today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, which is a good tool to finish on because it's something that we need right now. and we'll need for the next lesson بإذن ta'ala, which is الصبر في العلم تحملا وأداء. Being patient in knowledge while receiving it, i.e., in attaining knowledge, in learning knowledge, or giving it. A student has to have a teacher. The Prophet ﷺ was not given the Quran without Jibreel. And he himself said to the companions, you will hear from me, and you will hear from me, and those that come after you will hear from you, and so forth. So there has to be a teacher involved in some step of the way. Just like we wouldn't trust a doctor without that did not study with the teacher somewhere. If a doctor just said, I'm going to study books by myself, self-study, I'm going to do it all myself, we'll say, well, I'll wait for the next doctor. So to study Islamic sciences, a person has to have a teacher. Okay, the ninth tool can be summarized in the following: the importance of patience, number one; number two, the fruits of patience; number three, the types of patience. Number one, the importance of patience; number two, the fruits of patience; and number three, the types of patience. And we're specifically talking about patience in learning. The author mentions under the importance of patience, anything that is valuable cannot be reached except with patience. And the loftiest thing that the soul can carry is aiming excellency and holding on to it. Is aiming for something of a high excellency, of a high level. And this is why patience and striving to be patient is something that has been commanded at times to acquire the minimum of faith, and at times to acquire the perfection of faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sabiru wa sabiru. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ. Two ayat which can translate as, O you who have believed, remain patient and hold on to it. And Allah also mentions, and keep yourself patient, O Rasulullah, by being with those who call upon their Lord in the morning and the evening, seeking His face. Yahya mentioned in explaining this ayah, these are the gatherings of fiqh, of jurisprudence, are the circles of knowledge. The Shaykh then goes on to say, what's the fruits? What do you get out of having this patience? He says, and no one acquires knowledge except through patience. It is said, knowledge cannot be acquired with the body at rest. Whoever just wants to relax all the time, they will not learn. So through patience is expulsion from the disgrace of ignorance, and through it is enjoyed the taste of knowledge. And patience, when it comes to knowledge, is of three types. One of them, patience in carrying and acquiring it. So memorizing requires patience, and understanding requires patience, and attending the gatherings of knowledge requires patience, and giving the rights of the teacher requires patience. And sitting in front of your computer desk listening to a YouTube lesson at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night requires patience. Taking notes at that time requires patience. Not snacking and relaxing with your feet up while your teacher is speaking requires patience. All of that requires patience. But if a person is patient, bi'idhnillah, they will get what they aim for. If not all of it, then some of it. And the second type of patience, so the first type of patience with regards to knowledge, is patience in holding that knowledge, in getting that knowledge, in achieving that knowledge. And the second type of patience is patience in conveying that knowledge, spreading that knowledge, and giving it to the people. So sitting with those who learn, whose with those, learning requires patience, explaining requires patience, and tolerating their shortcomings requires patience. So the second type is knowledge in terms of learning. And the Shaykh goes on to say, and above these two types comes knowledge, patience upon being patient in these two, and remaining steadfast on these two. And those, naam, that's patience. Alhamdulillah. He goes on, to reach any height requires a jump, but what is difficult on men is to remain steadfast. And that's the end of the was that ninth tool. Let's look at the summary and then we will answer the question, inshallah. I hope your summary looks something like this. Not the look, but I hope that you have, inshallah ta'ala, these notes. Okay. So today we're starting on point number 5, tool number 5, which was conversing the path that leads to knowledge. Number one, the Sheikh told us the importance of that path. And that was that the person who does not take the right path to knowledge, the person does not take the right path to knowledge, will either not attain knowledge or they will struggle a lot and attain only a little bit. I will not be proportionate to the knowledge. And then the path is based upon two things: memorizing a concise, relied upon book, and studying it with a proficient and trustworthy teacher. And we said memorizing in each science. This is for each science. And we said the teacher's qualities is that they know what they're talking about, they know that topic, and that they are someone that you can look up to in terms of their deen, and that they will teach you what benefits you, not just look at what benefits them. Okay, and this is the lines of poetry that the Sheikh mentioned. Okay, number 6, paying attention to the sciences to be studied and prioritizing. He says, take from every science. A student should not be somebody that misses leg day, like those people that they work out and they never do the legs. The student never be like that. A student has to take from every different science. Level 1, he finishes level 1, but not just level 1 in one topic. Level 1 in aqidah, level 1 in fiqh, level 1 in hadith or Quran, level 1 in hadith, level 1 in Arabic, level 1 in usul al-fiqh, level 1 in usul tafsir, level 1 in usul al-hadith or mustalah al-hadith. He finishes all the level 1s, then he goes on to level 2, for example. When he finishes level 2 on all of them, then he goes on to level 3. Something like those along. So he does not just, it is not lopsided to just one topic. And the second thing the author mentioned here was, don't belittle the other sciences just because you're ignorant of it. Don't say because you never studied Mustalah al-Hadith, you say, Mustalah al-Hadith is not important. Within the time of Rijal, everybody knows Bukhari is authentic. Sahih Muslim, khalas, you don't need to study Mustalah al-Hadith. And if you find out it's because Mustalah al-Hadith is too difficult for him, that is not being trustworthy. If you don't know a science, if you cannot study a science, or if you not know if science is too difficult for you, then khalas, don't talk bad about it. Just don't do it. You stick to what you can do. And then the author gave us 2 points on how to prioritize. You prioritize by studying those things first which are obligatory upon you. Number 7, rushing to attain knowledge. Rushing meaning taking the best of your time. Start when you're young. If you're wanting to learn today, then start today. Don't leave until tomorrow. Don't leave until next week. Don't leave until next year. The benefit, then the author mentions here, the benefit of learning young. But don't think that you cannot learn when you're older. You can, inshallah. There's many scholars that learn, not many, but there are some scholars that learned when they were older. One of the scholars that is well known, Ibn al-Jawzi, learnt qira'at. It is reported that Sheikh mentions learnt qira'at, how to recite the Quran in different ways that the Prophet used to recite it at the age of 80. Even though qira'at is something that requires a lot of effort in terms of memory. There's another scholars reported to started learning when he was 80, seriously learning when he was 80, and he died around 100 and something, and he had actually achieved quite a lot in his studies. So it is not impossible, but as long as you, whatever age you are now, the person should start bit by bit. And then he gave us the reason behind it. Why is it better to learn when you're young? Because when you're young, you have less preoccupations. That's the main point of it. When you're young, you have less things to distract you. Then the eighth point was being moderate in seeking knowledge and leaving off rushing. Knowledge cannot be acquired all at once because knowledge is heavy. Was what we previously mentioned. Knowledge cannot be acquired all at once. Being gradual, tadarruj, is important. And how to learn gradually. Okay, now we know it's important because knowledge is too heavy to grab it all at once. Okay, what do you do? Number 1, you start with a concise book, a beginner's book in each subject, memorizing it and understanding it with the teacher. And number 2, you keep away from the big books, the mutawwalat, until you're at the level that you're ready for it. There may be times where a teacher may give you homework. Okay, research this from a certain big book. Okay, you go for that specific point, but don't just sit there just studying the big book as though you may be at that level. If you do that, then you'll be wasting your own time. At least, at minimum, you'll waste your own time. At maximum, you'll misguide others and yourself in the long run. Okay, and then there's the line of poetry the Sheikh mentioned: "Ta'amul kibar, summu sigar." Okay, with that we finish what we covered today. I think yes, we finish what we covered today. Okay. Uh, can we read? Okay. Can we read books? Can we read books by ourselves? Oh, you have to have a teacher, especially at the start. A person needs to have a teacher, and then the teacher may tell you, "Okay, study this book and come to me with the questions, or I will test you on it afterwards, depending on what you can understand from it." But especially what they call the mafatih, the keys which open that science, then the person needs to have a teacher to help the person understand it properly. Bismillah, and knows best. This is what we have read from what the scholars have said, or some of the scholars have said from what we read. I find it hard to find classes for women. Can you please recommend some? Uh, I don't know classes specifically for women, but there are plenty of lessons online now, especially as where we are because of the lockdown. So you look for lessons which, number one, if you know the teacher teaches in a way that uh, will make sense to you, you look for that. Number two, you look for topics which are obligatory upon you, like knowing who your Lord is, knowing who your Prophet ﷺ is, knowing what your religion is, and then specific topics such as the prayer, adhkar, and so forth. As for any classes I can specifically recommend, then that depends on a lot of different factors. Okay, how can one manage learning a particular science that becomes obligatory upon them through a trial whilst following their knowledge roadmap? The knowledge roadmap gives you certain foundations, it gives you certain principles. So, for example, you study a concise book in every science. Now, if a certain tribulation happens to a person or anything happens and certain topics become obligatory upon them, number one, it depends what that topic is. If you need a fatwa, you need to know what to do in a certain situation, that's different. Or if you need to learn certain rules for a certain topics, that's different. You can just ask a sheikh. But if you need to study a certain science, for example, a person makes money, and so they need to study zakah, then they will look for either the teachers that they're already studying with and ask them, okay, I need to study zakat for this reason. What would you recommend for me? Or if it's another different topic, they may ask the teacher to recommend for them a different topic, a different class. So the roadmap to knowledge, it would not stop you to, perhaps, for example, if you're in the middle of studying the book, if you're in the middle of studying a certain book and a certain issue happens, then you can ask the teacher that you're studying with, this issue has happened to me, I need to study this other topic, what do you recommend? And then they might say to you, okay, stop this. So for example, let me give you an example. There was a sheikh who studied usul al-thalatha, then he read kitab al-tawheed, then he was going to read the teacher was going to teach him al-wasatiyah. And then when the teacher heard the student reading something in an incorrect way, the teacher said to him, okay, stop this book now. Al-Wasatiyah, stop. Read Ajrumiyah or Al-Ajramiyah, because you need to understand, you need to know the Arabic language better, or the rules of Arabic grammar. And so he stopped him at Al-Wasatiyah, made him read Ajrumiyah, and then he went back to Wasatiyah or something along those lines. So whenever issues occurs, it doesn't mean that you have to stay on that book until you finish it, no matter what happens. You can move from book to book, as we mentioned in Hilya Talib al-Ilm, if there is a reason. So he said, don't move from book to book. The author said, don't move, rahimahullah, said, don't move from book to book. And then he said, unless there is a reason. So it could be that certain issues have happened, so something else becomes more important or more obligatory upon you in that specific situation. That is not an issue, inshallah ta'ala. Do you have any advice for teaching young children under 7 years old? Young children under 7 years old, Allah Ta'ala a'lam, Allah knows best. You teach them what you can. It depends what level they are, depends what their family, what their house environment is, and so forth. But mainly speaking, at the young age, they follow what their parents do. So if they see you reading Quran and you try to make it easy for them and nice for them, then they will tend to follow you in reading Quran. So there's a lot of different factors. If they're already in preschool or whatever they may be in, then you may have to teach them like they learn in preschool. With the alphabet, you make nice letters, you stick them on the board, and all that type of stuff. And then there's also teaching them stories that have meanings, stories of the Quran, stories of the prophets. That is easier for them to remember and to grasp than concepts. When you're older, generally speaking, we understand concepts more. When you're younger, generally speaking, not always, you generally understand by copying. You don't really understand concepts. That's with most things, not everything. That's most things. So if you understand, like if they hear stories and so forth, it will be easier for them to understand. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Okay, next lesson, inshallah Ta'ala, will be next Sunday. We stop there. Subhanakallahum bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. If anyone has questions, send them in the WhatsApp groups. Jazakumullahu khairan.